Hey guys, it's Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms, and tonight we will be talking about handheld CB radios. Handhelds kind of, they get forgotten in the world of CB radio, especially these days. You have your mobile radios, which look like this, and you put in your car, or with a power amplifier you can have a hook to a conventional house power supply and used as a base station, which is what I have running right here. And then of course you have your genuine base stations, which look like this here. But you also have these handheld radios. And here's two examples right here. This is a pretty old one, and this is a fairly new one. Both of these are made by Radio Shack. Radio Shack is probably where the majority of your handheld radios are going to come from. Although Cobra, Midland, Uniden, probably Maxton, I think, all made handhelds. And in fact, a company called Cherokee made a handheld that even had sideband, which was really cool. I've never seen one. I remember them being talked about back in the day. I've never seen one, and I've never heard anyone talking on one. So if you have one out there, maybe you could chime in and point me to a video of your own that shows you using it. It'd be kind of neat. Anyway, back to tonight's discussion. Handhelds. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So you've got those other two. You've also got this. And handhelds probably get ignored a lot because there's just not a lot of traffic on CB radio. So why would somebody want to get a handheld radio as opposed to getting a FRMS or GMRS radio, like a those little ones, they're family kits, family radio. Those are really popular. I have two sets of them myself. They're great for, like, let's say the kids all go to a fair. You want to have one person in contact with another, that kind of stuff. Obviously, again, those were even more popular before cell phones really got to saturating the market, but they're still pretty popular. I know I use them on job sites sometimes. I'll use them here at the house sometimes. If I'm going to be underneath the house or above the house and my wife's inside and we're trying to communicate back and forth, it sure beats yelling. So those are obviously have their place in the world. So again, why own a handheld? And the answer is, why not, right? They're very inexpensive. A handheld CB radio does have its purpose. If you have a friend who's on a mobile and you're attempting to communicate them, or on a base and you're attempting to communicate with them, well, then you're going to need a CB radio to do it. And if you're out hiking, or you're someplace away from base camp, let's say if you go on a hunting trip, a lot of times they're using CB radio base and mobile setups. Now, some people do have ATV setups, mobile radio setups on that, but again, a handheld would probably be superior to that in usability, ease of use, I would say. And there's some other things that are kind of cool about this. I can use this as a mobile radio in my car. This particular model has a hookup for an external antenna. And I could also use this as a base station. In fact, when I was very young, I did use this as a base station. This was my only radio. So I got a power supply, just a regular old 12-volt power supply, not even a regulated power supply, just like a wall wart, and plug that in there, and wouldn't you know, I have a base station. Extend the antenna, go sit on the front lawn, or if it's cold outside, open the window a crack, and I'm ready to go. And I did. I used it for that. So that's something you can do. In an emergency situation, you don't want to have a base setup like this. You don't want to buy the hassle of buying a power supply or a giant antenna. You can pick up one of these. I've seen them as cheap as $5. In fact, this one I talked about in my How to Get Into the Hobby Cheap video. I did buy it for $5, new in the box, and it works perfect. So for $5 and a 12-volt power supply, which you probably have sitting around the house anyway, you got a base station. You can use it. Now your range might be limited. This antenna, the rubber ducky style, and we'll get into it here in a second when I show you side by side, has its advantages because it's compact. It's not going to break off on you. It's probably the one I would want to wear on my side if I was going to go hiking and needed to stay in contact with a base. But if I wanted to use it as a real base station, I'd want to take this off and buy a BNC to PL259 connector, and then I can use this as a base station as well. Or as I said, on the other one, there's the ability to plug into the side. So very cool. So yeah, there are reasons to do it, and I've owned them for many years. I've never once considered getting rid of that one. This one I will probably resell at some point just because it's redundant. I already have one. But I'm always looking out for a good deal on CB radios, and I'm always looking out to upgrade. So if I've come across another one and it's better than the one that I have, sure, I'm going to pick it up. So let's come in a little closer here. We'll take a look at the two radios that I have, plus I'm going to show you some pictures of what I consider to be the ultimate in handhelds, and then we'll wrap up the video after that. Here are two examples that I happen to have with me. We've already covered a few of the different models you see out there, but I want to show you on these two that I have. Well, both of these are good Radio Shack radios, but one of them has some features that I'd probably tend to purchase if I were to buy one of these new or used. So let's start with the one I just picked up not too long ago. I showed you in my video how to get into CB radio cheap, that I got this radio in the box with the manual and everything. Here's the box for it, for $5. Not a bad deal. Now this has some features and it's nice. It's very lightweight. I don't have any batteries in it right now, but your battery compaction goes in there. You can also put rechargeable batteries in there like most of these handhelds will offer. So let's take a look on the side here. We have our power high and low button for conserving battery power or talking in close ranges. Then we have our power button, which also doubles as a recharger for the charging pack. On the front you have your speaker, and there's a small dot here for your microphone. You have your 40-channel digital readout here. You have a charging light, and you have your TX or battery light. The battery light will illuminate if the batteries are too low. Transmit obviously is for the transmit. And that brings us to this side. We have a push to transmit button, and we have our channel up and down buttons. And on the back we have a clip for putting this on our battery or on our belt clip. And on the top we have our connection for our rubber ducky antenna. Unscrew that and off it comes, and that leaves us with a BNC connector up here. You can hook a BNC to CB radio connector onto that. I think it's PL259 connector. So you can buy an adapter, I would say at Radio Shack, but they're kind of out of business now. But you can buy an adapter somewhere, and then instead of using your rubber ducky, you just hook this to a cable, and voila, you have a base station antenna. I'll go ahead and plug this in. I don't have any batteries for this. Squelch control, channel up and down. Push when you transmit, you got your TX light that comes on. Very simplistic design, but effective if you're looking for a handheld. You put rechargeable batteries in this thing, and this gets the job done. Now let's take a look at another one. It's an older model, but it has some features that this one doesn't that I kind of prefer. And there's even a step up from that, and we'll show some pictures of that that is pretty much the ultimate in the handheld department. So let me put this one down, and let's take a look at this. Now this is this one's probably late 80s model, TRC217. I think I got this in 87. I've had it a very long time, obviously. Now it's very similar in design to the other one. It's a little heavier, but really not all that much. It's maybe a ½ inch thicker and a ½ inch to an inch taller. That would be the biggest differences. Now you have a little display readout here, and I'll show you when I plug it in. But this red button right here, you push that and it lights it up, so it lets you know in the dark what channel you're on. On the top of this radio, you have your high and low power transmission selector, and then you do have all 40 channels, but it's a manual selector knob. You select it there. It also shows up here, and again at night you can push the button and illuminate what channel you're on. On this side we have one or two extra features. So we have a regular power plug, but this one you have to plug a separate charger in if you want. So there's two, one's a power cord, one's for charging only. This is what I like about this, and I would try to find this if you were going to look for a used one. This one has an external antenna connection, so instead of having to take the regular antenna off and put a connector up here, you just set this thing on the table with a connector, run it to a base station antenna, and this doubles as a base station. Or you can run it to a cable and run it to your antenna in your car, and this can sit in the passenger seat and double as a mobile radio. So I like that about this, and it's one of the reasons I purchased this. It also has a hand holding thing here. It doesn't have a belt clip, but it has that to keep it from falling out of your hands. Battery compartment is much like the other one. Nothing really special there. No plug, no changes there as far as it can detect whether it's okay, so like the other one had a switch for whether it was a chargeable or regular batteries. This one has two plugs instead. I'm not sure what the advantage of that would be, but that's just the way they decided to do it. On our front we have our volume and squelch like the other one had on its side. That's about the same. And then on our other side here we have our push to talk button. That is pretty much the function. Now the biggest difference between a radio like this and a radio like this is you would think that it's more convenient having this little rubber ducky antenna, and it certainly is. But when it comes to range, which would you rather have? The 6-foot long antenna on this one that just keeps going and going and going and going and going, and it keeps going out a lot farther than that, or that, maybe a 15-inch antenna that's on this one that you don't have the opportunity to extend in areas that you could extend it. So for that reason, I would recommend you try to find an older model that has a fully extendable antenna. You're going to get the extra range out of it. You can open it, you're supposed to open it all the way up for transmitting, but as long as you're keeping a conversation short, if you have this thing halfway open, yes, your SWRs are definitely going to be affected by that, but as long as you're not talking for 5 minutes straight, you should be okay. So let me show you a picture now of what is the ultimate as far as handheld radios go, and that would be one like this that also has the ability to plug in a mic. So now you can use a handheld mic like this one here, plus you have the opportunity to plug in an external speaker like this one here, and of course you still have the opportunity to plug in an external antenna. So now you've taken a little handheld that you probably picked up for less than 15 bucks, and now you have the ability to make it into what is basically a full-fledged base station, and that's pretty cool. So I think that if I had to choose to do it over again, and if I ever come across one of those, I certainly would pick it up. They're great. And here's a model. Here's one that has that functioning. I'm sure there's others out here. Most of the ones I'm familiar with are just the Radio Shack models, but a pretty neat setup. Oh, let me go back and I'll show you one more thing on this. That's that light there, and I don't know how well it'll show up, but yeah, you can see that red light come on. So you pick your channel, and if it's dark out, you just press that button, it lets you know what channel you're on. Easier to read than having to stick a flashlight and look down at this. A lot of talking on this when I was younger. Alright, so now we've taken a look at three different examples of handhelds, and we've talked a little bit about why you would want to or why you wouldn't want to own one. The verdict is pretty much up to you. Like I said, I have a purpose for these things. Occasionally, I will use them if I'm attempting to contact somebody out camping. But most of the time, it sits and collects dust. That's probably more because of the fact that all of my cars have CB radios in them, and my house and here in the garage, they also have CB radios already installed in them. But if I didn't, if I only had to pick one radio out of all the radios that I had, if I just wanted one and I didn't want it to take up a lot of space and I wanted to be able to use it for a variety of things, the TRC 217 like this, or that fancier one that I showed you pictures of, fits that bill almost perfectly. It doesn't take up hardly any room. I can use it as a handheld, I can use it as a mobile in the car, or I can use it as a base in the house. I could add a base station antenna and a power supply, and this thing will sound every bit as good as this radio right here. And I think that surprises people. It's something they just don't consider, is that you could have something like this and work it just as good as that. So, things to consider. Anyway, that is tonight's conversation. We've had it. Handheld radios, what are they good for? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, maybe you'll consider liking and subscribing, because obviously there'll be more just like it. I think next we'll be covering base station antennas. I've got an Antron 899, so most of it will revolve around that in particular, but we'll talk about some other things that you can do or not do, or even the concept of building your own antenna, which is relatively easy and inexpensive if you're a little bit handy like myself. That's it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.